The smell of garlic and butter filled the air as Mia Chen hurried between tables, a tray balanced perfectly on one hand. The soft clinking of silverware against plates and the hum of conversation created a familiar soundtrack to her day. 6 hours into her shift, her feet ached, but her smile never faltered. "Here's your mushroom risotto," she said, placing the steaming dish in front of an older gentleman. "And the grilled salmon for you, ma'am. Can I get you anything else right now?" The couple shook their heads, already reaching for their forks. Mia nodded and stepped away, pausing to wipe her hands on her black apron. She glanced around the restaurant. The soft golden lighting, the crisp white tablecloths, the polished silverware, all signs of a place where people came to spend more on one meal than she made in half a day. Riverstone was one of the most popular restaurants downtown. Not quite fancy enough to require a jacket, but expensive enough that most people saved it for special occasions. Mia had worked here for nearly 3 years now, ever since she'd moved to the city after high school. The job paid her bills, most of them anyway, and the tips were decent enough that she could sometimes put a little aside. "Order up for table 12, called Jorge from the kitchen window. Mia hurried over, grabbing the plates of pasta and arranging them carefully on her tray. "You look beat," Jorge said, his forehead shiny with sweat from the heat of the kitchen. "Double shift again?" "Third one this week," Mia replied, adjusting the plates. "Rent's due next week." Jorge shook his head. "You work too hard, kid." Mia just shrugged. Everyone at Riverstone worked hard. That was just life. As she turned with her loaded tray, her eyes fell on the grand piano in the corner of the dining room. It sat on a small raised platform, its polished black surface catching the light. Most days it sat untouched, a fancy decoration more than anything. On weekends and special events, the owner hired a pianist to play soft background music. But today, a Wednesday, it was silent. Something tugged inside Mia's chest as she looked at it. A memory, maybe, or just a wish. "Table 12 is still waiting," called Lucia, the head server, snapping Mia back to reality. "On it!" Mia hurried across the floor, weaving between tables with practiced ease. The evening crowd was starting to arrive. Business people ending their workday with expensive drinks, couples celebrating anniversaries, groups of friends treating themselves. Mia moved efficiently between them all, refilling water glasses, taking orders, delivering food, all while keeping track of who needed what and when. "You're in section 4 tonight too?" asked Benji, another server, as they both stopped at the water station. "Yeah, Addie called in sick again," Mia said, filling her pitcher. "I don't mind. Could use the extra tips. Your feet must be killing you." Benji had only been at Riverstone for a few months, but he'd quickly become one of Mia's favorite co-workers. No drama, no complaints, just showed up and did the work. Nothing a hot shower won't fix. Mia smiled. "Besides, Mrs. Patterson is in my section, and you know she always tips 20%. "Lucky you. I've got the table of suits by the window. All separate checks, and they've already sent back 2 bottles of wine." Mia winced in sympathy. "Hang in there. Night's still young." "That's what I'm afraid of," Benji replied with a grin before heading back to his section. The hours ticked by. Mia moved on autopilot, smiling, serving, clearing, repeating. The restaurant slowly emptied as the night went on. By 10:30, only a few tables remained, mostly people lingering over dessert and coffee. During a rare quiet moment, Mia found herself near the piano again. Without thinking, she reached out and touched the smooth wood, letting her fingers trail along the edge. The cover was down over the keys, locked to prevent curious guests from playing. "You play?" Mia jumped and turned to see David, the owner, watching her with a curious expression. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the relaxed confidence of someone who'd found success doing what he loved. "Oh, no, Mia pulled her hand back quickly. "Sorry, I was just—" "No need to apologize," David said with a small smile. "It's a beautiful instrument. Yamaha C3. Not the biggest grand they make, but the tone is perfect for this space." Mia nodded, feeling awkward. In 3 years, she'd probably spoken to David fewer than a dozen times. He was usually in his office handling the business side of things, leaving the day-to-day restaurant operations to the managers. "It looks expensive," she said, not knowing what else to say. David laughed. "It was, but worth every penny when we have the right person playing it." He checked his watch. "Speaking of which, this Friday we've got a new pianist starting. Philip says he studied at Juilliard." "That sounds impressive," Mia said politely. "We'll see. The last guy looked good on paper too, but couldn't read the room." kept playing complicated classical pieces when all people want during dinner is something pleasant in the background. David shrugged. Anyway, don't let me keep you. Right. Mia straightened her apron. Have a good night, sir. As David walked away, Mia took one last look at the piano before returning to her tables. By midnight, her section was empty, and she was going through her closing duties, refilling salt and pepper shakers, wiping down menus, restocking napkins for the next day's lunch service. The kitchen had closed an hour ago, and most of the staff had already left. Only Lucia and 2 busboys remained, finishing their own tasks. You can head out, Lucia called to her. We're pretty much done here. You sure? Mia asked, though her feet screamed in agreement with Lucia's suggestion. Positive. You've been here since lunch. Go home. Thanks. Mia untied her apron and headed to the small break room in the back. She changed out of her server uniform, black slacks and a white button-up shirt, and into her street clothes, a simple t-shirt and jeans. She counted her tips for the day, just over $140. Not bad for a Wednesday. As she walked through the now empty restaurant toward the front door, she paused again by the piano. The dining room was dark except for a few safety lights, giving the space an entirely different feel. Without the noise and movement of customers and staff, there was something almost magical about the quiet restaurant. Mia looked around. Lucia was in the back office counting the day's receipts. The busboys were in the kitchen, putting away the last of the clean dishes. No one would see. Carefully, she lifted the cover over the piano keys. It wasn't locked after all. She sat on the bench feeling both nervous and excited, like she was breaking a rule even though she wasn't doing anything wrong. Her fingers hovered over the keys. How long had it been? 2 years? 3? The small apartment she shared with 2 roommates had no space for a piano, and piano lessons had been one of the first luxuries cut when money got tight after the move. Gently, she pressed a key. The note hung in the air, soft and clear. She pressed another, then another, finding the familiar pattern of a C major scale. Her fingers remembered even if it had been years. Up and down the scale she went, so focused that she didn't notice the figure watching from the doorway of the back office. Mia closed her eyes, letting her hands find the keys from memory. Slowly, hesitantly, she began to play the first piece that came to mind, a simple Chopin prelude her teacher had made her practice over and over. She fumbled a few notes, winced at a wrong chord, but kept going. With each measure, her confidence grew, her fingers loosening, finding their old strength and flexibility. For a few precious minutes, she wasn't a tired server at the end of a double shift. She was just a girl playing the piano, lost in the simple joy of creating music. The sound of a door closing somewhere in the back of the restaurant startled her. Mia's eyes flew open and she quickly closed the piano cover, standing up so fast she almost knocked over the bench. Sorry, she whispered to the empty room, to the piano, to whoever might have heard. Grabbing her bag, she hurried to the front door, suddenly embarrassed though no one had seen her. Outside, the night air was cool against her skin. Mia pulled her light jacket tighter around her shoulders and started the 15-minute walk to her apartment. The city hummed around her, late-night traffic, distant sirens, music spilling from bars still open. A world away from the quiet piano in the corner of Riverstone, she'd forgotten how much she missed playing. Growing up, the piano had been her escape, her comfort, her joy. Years of lessons, recitals, competitions. Music had been the center of her world once, and now it was just a memory like so many other things she'd left behind. Mia sighed, quickening her pace. Her roommates would be asleep by now, and she needed to be up early for another lunch shift tomorrow. No time to dwell on old dreams. This was her life now, serving food, counting tips, paying bills. Simple, predictable, safe. But as she walked, her fingers twitched at her sides, still feeling the ghost of the keys beneath them, still hearing the music that had, for a brief moment, filled the empty restaurant with something beautiful. 2 weeks had passed since Mia's late-night moment at the piano. Life had continued as usual, serving tables, counting tips, falling into bed too tired to think about much else. If she sometimes found herself humming classical pieces while refilling water glasses, well, no one seemed to notice. Friday evening at Riverstone was always busy. The weekend crowd dressed a little nicer, talked a little louder, ordered more expensive wines. Mia moved efficiently between her tables, her black shoes practically gliding across the polished floor. "How's the sea bass tonight?" asked an older woman at table 7, peering over her reading glasses at the menu. "It's excellent," Mia replied with a genuine smile. "Chef Jorge serves it with a lemon butter sauce and seasonal vegetables. It's one of our most popular dishes." The woman nodded, satisfied. "Then that's what I'll have. Wonderful choice. And for you, sir?" As Mia took the rest of the table's order, she noticed some commotion near the entrance. David, the owner, was speaking with Lucia in hushed but clearly agitated tones. Lucia kept shaking her head while David ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Mia had come to recognize as his response to stress. "I'll put these orders right in," Mia told table 7, tucking her notepad into her apron pocket and heading toward the kitchen. On her way, she passed close enough to overhear part of David and Lucia's conversation. "What do you mean he's not coming?" "The dining room is full," David was saying. His message said he had a better offer from the hotel downtown. Double the pay, apparently. Lucia looked as displeased as David. He apologized for the short notice. David muttered something under his breath that Mia couldn't hear. "That's the second pianist this month who's bailed on us. The Hendersons are hosting 12 people tonight for their anniversary, and they specifically asked about the live music when they made the reservation." Mia entered the kitchen, calling out the new orders to Jorge. The familiar chaos of the kitchen, the sizzle of pans, the shouts of line cooks, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables washed over her. She grabbed the appetizers for table 9 and headed back out. For the next hour, Mia fell into the familiar routine of a busy Friday night. Take orders, bring food, check on tables, repeat. But she couldn't help noticing the empty piano in the corner, or the way David kept glancing at the front door as if hoping a pianist might materialize. By 7:30, the restaurant was completely full, with a small line of people waiting by the host stand. The noise level had risen with the crowd, laughter, conversations, the clink of glasses, but there was still a noticeable absence without the usual background music. Mia was delivering a bottle of red wine to a young couple when she overheard the woman say, "I thought they were supposed to have a pianist tonight. That's one of the reasons I wanted to come here. Maybe they're taking a break," her date suggested, clearly not as bothered by the lack of music. "I guess," the woman replied, looking disappointed. Mia uncorked the wine with practiced movements. "Can I pour a taste for you, sir?" As the evening progressed, Mia noticed more people glancing at the empty piano. A few even asked about it directly. Each time she smiled apologetically and promised the manager would address their concerns. During a rare lull, Mia found herself near the back office, where David was on the phone. "Yes, I understand you're busy, but we're in a bind here," he was saying, his voice strained. "We're willing to pay extra." "I see. No, I understand. Thanks anyway." He hung up and noticed Mia standing nearby. "Bad luck, huh?" he said with a forced smile. "The pianist didn't show?" Mia asked, though she already knew the answer. "Took a better offer elsewhere. Can't really blame him, I suppose." David sighed. "I've called everyone I can think of, but it's Friday night. Anyone who can play is already booked." Mia shifted her weight from one aching foot to the other. "Is it really that big a deal?" "The food is still great. It's about the experience," David explained. "People come here for more than just food. They come for the ambiance, the whole package." He gestured toward the dining room. "See the large group in the corner? That's Dr. Henderson and his wife. 30 years married today. They've been coming here for special occasions for years, and his wife always requests a specific song on the piano." Mia glanced over at the large table where an elegantly dressed older couple sat surrounded by what appeared to be family members. They all looked happy, engrossed in conversation. "Plus," David continued, "I've got a table of potential investors here tonight, people who might help fund our expansion next year. The piano music is part of what makes Riverstone." "Well, Riverstone?" Mia nodded, understanding now why David seemed so stressed. This wasn't just about ambiance. It was about business. "I should get back out there," she said. "Table 15 is waiting for their check." David nodded distractedly, already pulling out his phone again, presumably to try another pianist. Mia returned to the dining room, delivering checks, taking dessert orders, and refilling coffee cups. All the while, her eyes kept drifting to the silent piano. Could she? Should she? No, that would be crazy. Playing alone in an empty restaurant was one thing. Playing in front of a full house of paying customers, that was something else entirely. She hadn't seriously practiced in years. She'd embarrass herself, embarrass the restaurant. And yet, at 8:30, Mia was serving dessert to a family of 4 when she heard David's voice, amplified slightly. He was standing near the piano, addressing the dining room. "Good evening, everyone. First, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight at Riverstone." His smile was professional, but Mia could see the tension in his shoulders. "I need to apologize for the absence of our usual Friday night piano music. Unfortunately, our pianist had an emergency and couldn't make it tonight." A murmur ran through the restaurant. Nothing too dramatic, but a ripple of disappointment was evident. "However," David continued, "your dining experience is our top priority. To make up for this inconvenience, we'll be offering complimentary desserts this evening. Please just let your server know your selection." That seemed to mollify most of the guests, who returned to their conversations with renewed enthusiasm at the prospect of free dessert. But Mia noticed Mrs. Henderson leaning over to say something to her husband, her expression crestfallen. Mia bit her lip, thinking hard as she cleared plates from a nearby table. Free desserts would cost the restaurant hundreds of dollars tonight, and it wouldn't solve the problem for the people who had specifically come for the music. Before she could talk herself out of it, Mia set down her tray and walked over to where David stood, now speaking quietly with Lucia near the host stand. "Excuse me," she said, her heart suddenly pounding in her chest. Both David and Lucia turned to look at her. Mia took a deep breath. "I can play." David blinked. "You what?" "The piano. I can play it." Mia's mouth felt dry. "I mean, I'm not a professional or anything, but I had lessons for years. I know some classical pieces, some popular songs. Enough to, fill in." David and Lucia exchanged a glance. "You're serious?" David asked. Mia nodded, already wondering if she was making a huge mistake. "I noticed Mrs. Henderson seemed disappointed about the music. I just thought, maybe I could help." David studied her for a moment. "Do you know La Vie en Rose? It's Mrs. Henderson's favorite. The Edith Piaf song?" "Yes, I know it." Mia had played it countless times during her lessons. It was one of her mother's favorites, too. David looked at Lucia, who shrugged as if to say, "What do we have to lose?" "All right," David said, turning back to Mia. "If you're willing to try, we're grateful for the help." Mia felt a surge of both excitement and terror. "I should probably wash my hands first," she said, looking down at fingers that had been serving food all evening. "Of course." David nodded. "Take a few minutes and then, well, whenever you're ready." Mia hurried to the employee bathroom, her mind racing. What was she thinking? She hadn't performed in front of people in years. She quickly washed her hands, splashed some water on her face, and stared at her reflection in the mirror. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "It's just like riding a bike, right?" But as she dried her hands, she wasn't so sure. Playing alone in an empty restaurant was nothing like performing for a full house of paying customers. What if she messed up? What if everyone hated it? What if she got fired? She took a deep breath. No, David was desperate. He wouldn't fire her for trying to help. And she did know how to play, even if she was rusty. At worst, people would get a mediocre piano performance along with their free dessert. Walking back through the kitchen, she found Benji plating a dessert order. "Hey, can you cover my tables for a bit?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Benji looked up, confused. "Why, what's going on?" I'm going to try to play the piano." Benji's eyes widened. "You play piano? Since when?" "Since I was a kid." "Look, I'll explain later. Can you just check on tables 4, 7, and 15 if I'm not back in a few minutes?" "Sure, but thanks." Mia called over her shoulder, already heading for the dining room. As she approached the piano, she felt as if she were walking through syrup, each step taking tremendous effort. The chatter of the restaurant seemed to fade into the background. She was vaguely aware of David watching her from near the bar, of a few curious glances from nearby tables. The bench felt different from the one in her childhood home. Higher, firmer. Mia adjusted it slightly, settled herself, and lifted the cover over the keys. The polished white and black keys gleamed under the restaurant's soft lighting. Mia placed her fingers on them, feeling their cool smoothness. Just breathe, she told herself. Just play. And then, without letting herself think about it any further, she began. The first notes of La Vie en Rose filled the air, tentative at first, then growing stronger as her fingers remembered their old patterns. She stumbled once, recovered, and continued, letting the familiar melody guide her. Slowly, she became aware of a change in the restaurant. The din of conversation had quieted somewhat. People were listening. She didn't dare look up, afraid she'd lose her place in the music if she did. Instead, she closed her eyes and let her memory take over, the way she used to during recitals when she was nervous. As the final notes of the song faded away, Mia opened her eyes, suddenly very conscious of the silence that had fallen across the dining room. And then, from the corner table, applause. Dr. Henderson was on his feet, clapping enthusiastically. His wife beside him had tears in her eyes, a smile brightening her entire face. The applause spread table by table until the whole restaurant was filled with it. Mia felt her cheeks grow warm. She gave an awkward little nod of acknowledgement, unsure what to do next. David appeared at her side. "That was wonderful," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Would you mind playing a few more pieces?" Mia looked up at him, saw the genuine appreciation in his eyes, and felt something unlock inside her. A door she'd closed long ago, now creaking open again. "I'd love to," she said, and turned back to the keys. Mia's fingers glided across the piano keys as she played the final notes of Moon River. She'd been at the piano for almost an hour now, moving from one song to the next, each piece coming back to her more easily than the last. It was as if a part of her brain had simply been waiting for this moment, storing away all those years of practice until she needed them again. The restaurant had settled into a pleasant rhythm around her music. Conversations continued, but at a softer volume. Servers moved between tables with an almost dance-like quality, as if matching their steps to the tempo of her playing. Even Jorge had poked his head out of the kitchen a few times, watching with undisguised surprise as Mia, the same Mia who'd been clearing plates an hour ago, filled the restaurant with beautiful music. As she finished the song, there was another round of gentle applause. Mia had stopped blushing after the third or fourth song, growing more comfortable with the attention. She still couldn't quite believe what was happening. "That was lovely, dear." Mia looked up to see Mrs. Henderson standing beside the piano, her eyes bright with appreciation. She was an elegant woman in her 70s, with silver hair swept into a stylish updo and pearl earrings that caught the light when she moved. "Thank you," Mia replied, suddenly feeling shy again. "I hope you enjoyed your anniversary dinner." "Oh, we did," Mrs. Henderson smiled. 30 years married, and Richard still finds ways to surprise me. But I must say your playing was an unexpected delight. You have a real gift. That's very kind of you to say. It's not kindness, dear, it's truth. You play with feeling, not just skill." Mrs. Henderson placed a hand lightly on the piano. "Do you know Claire de Lune?" "It's another favorite of mine." Mia nodded. "Debussy. I used to play it all the time. Would you mind, for an old woman's anniversary?" "Not at all," Mia said, adjusting her position on the bench. "And you're hardly old, Mrs. Henderson." The woman laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "Flattery will get you everywhere. And please call me Eleanor." Mia smiled and began to play the delicate opening notes of the Debussy piece. This one was more complex than the others she'd played tonight, requiring more nuance and control. But her fingers seemed to remember every note, every subtle change in pressure needed to bring the piece to life. She lost herself in the music, the way she always had as a teenager, when piano had been her escape from homework, from arguments with her parents, from the ordinary stresses of growing up. For those few minutes, nothing existed but the sound and the movement of her hands. When she finished, she looked up to find Eleanor still beside her, now joined by her husband. Both had tears in their eyes. "That was beautiful," Dr. Henderson said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Absolutely beautiful." Eleanor squeezed her husband's hand. "Richard proposed to me after a concert where they played that piece. Hearing it tonight, well, it took us right back to that moment." Mia felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm glad I could bring back that memory for you." "Music has that power," Eleanor said. "It connects us to moments in time better than almost anything else." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, handing it to Mia. "I'm on the board of the Community Arts Center downtown. We're always looking for talent for our events. If you're ever interested, please give me a call." Mia took the card, stunned. "I thank you. I will." The Hendersons said goodnight, joining their family members who were putting on coats and gathering purses, As they left, David approached the piano, a bottle of water in hand. "Thought you might be thirsty," he said, offering it to Mia. She took it gratefully, suddenly aware of how parched she was. "Thanks." "So?" David leaned against the piano, careful not to put too much weight on it. "Were you ever going to mention that you're a concert-level pianist, or was that just going to be our little secret?" Mia laughed, taking a long drink of water. "I wouldn't say concert-level. I haven't played seriously in years. Could have fooled me, and everyone else here." David gestured around the restaurant. "You just saved the evening, you know that, right?" "Happy to help," Mia said, recapping the water bottle. The restaurant had begun to thin out, with only a few tables still lingering over coffee and dessert. "I should probably get back to my regular job, though. My tables. Benji and Lucia have been covering them," David assured her. "And don't worry, they're splitting your tips with you." "That's really nice of them. They were pretty blown away, too." "We all were." David studied her thoughtfully. "Why didn't you ever mention you could play like that?" Mia shrugged, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. "It never came up. And honestly, I haven't played much since moving here. No piano in my apartment, and lessons are expensive." "So what happened? Did you study music in college?" Mia shook her head. "Never went to college. Couldn't afford it." She said this matter-of-factly, without self-pity. It was just the reality of her life. "After high school, I moved here to try to save up enough to maybe take some classes at the community college. But then there was rent and food, and my roommate's cat needed surgery." She trailed off with a small smile. "Life happens, you know." David nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Well, life certainly happened tonight. In a good way." He straightened up. "Look, I know this is sudden, but would you consider playing here regularly? Friday and Saturday nights to start. We'd pay you, of course, the same rate we pay our other pianists." Mia stared at him. "Are you serious?" "Completely. You're good, Mia, really good. And the crowd loved you." David gestured to the nearly empty restaurant. "People stayed longer tonight. Ordered more drinks, more desserts. And I've already had 3 tables ask if you'll be playing again tomorrow. But I'm a server," Mia said, as if reminding them both of an important fact. "You're a server who plays piano beautifully," David corrected. "And I'm a businessman who recognizes talent when I see it." He pulled out his phone, checked something, then continued. "We'd start you at $150 per night, plus meals. 4 hours each night with breaks. You'd still keep your server shifts during the week if you want them." Mia's mind raced. The extra money would be a game changer. She could start saving again. Maybe even look into those community college classes she'd been putting off. And to play regularly, to have access to this beautiful piano. "Can I think about it?" she asked, though she already knew her answer. David smiled. "Of course, but not too long. I've got a restaurant to run. I'll let you know tomorrow," Mia promised. "Perfect." David checked his watch. "We're pretty much done for the night. Why don't you head home? You've more than earned it." Mia nodded, suddenly aware of how tired she was. The adrenaline of performing had kept her going, but now exhaustion was setting in. "Thanks, David." "Thank you." "Mia, you're full of surprises." He gave the piano a gentle pat before walking away to speak with the remaining staff. Mia carefully closed the cover over the keys and stood up, stretching muscles that had been in one position too long. As she headed to the break room to collect her things, Benji appeared at her side. "So that happened," he said, grinning widely. "Yeah," Mia laughed, still not quite believing it herself. "That happened. Why didn't you tell me you were secretly amazing at piano?" "I thought we were friends." Benji's tone was teasing, but there was real admiration in his eyes. "It just never came up," Mia said, echoing what she'd told David. "Well, consider it brought up now. You were incredible." Benji held up a small envelope. "Also your tips. Some people left extra when they found out their server was also the pianist." Mia took the envelope, feeling a bit overwhelmed. "Thanks for covering my tables." "Are you kidding? It was worth it just to see the look on Lucia's face when you sat down at that piano." Benji laughed. I think her jaw literally dropped. They reached the break room where Mia gathered her jacket and bag. A few other servers who'd been working that night were there too, all of them looking at her with new interest. "That was amazing, Mia," said Tina, a weekend server Mia didn't know very well. "Where did you learn to play like that?" "I took lessons as a kid," Mia explained, feeling a bit uncomfortable with all the attention. "My grandmother was a piano teacher. She started me when I was 5. "Well, you killed it out there," said Anton, one of the bartenders. Seriously, people at the bar couldn't stop talking about it. "Thanks," Mia said, pulling on her jacket. It was fun. The walk home that night felt different somehow. The same streets, the same buildings, but Mia felt as if something fundamental had shifted. The cool night air seemed fresher, the city sounds almost musical. She found herself humming Clair de Lune as she walked, her fingers moving slightly at her sides as if still playing. When she reached her apartment, she was surprised to find her roommate Zoe still awake, watching a movie on their small TV. "Hey," Zoe said, glancing up. "How was work?" Mia set down her bag, a smile spreading across her face. "You're not going to believe what happened." She told Zoe everything, about the missing pianist, her impulsive offer to play, the Hendersons, and David's job offer. Zoe listened with increasing amazement, pausing her movie and sitting up straighter as the story unfolded. "Mia, that's incredible," she exclaimed when Mia had finished. "Are you going to take the job?" "I think so," Mia admitted. "The extra money would be great, and I've missed playing. I didn't realize how much until tonight." "This is huge," Zoe said, her excitement genuine, like life-changing huge. "You should celebrate." Mia laughed. "I'm too tired to celebrate, but maybe tomorrow. Definitely tomorrow." Zoe's expression grew thoughtful. "You know, there's that old keyboard in Pete's closet. He never uses it. I bet he'd let you practice on it if you asked." Pete was their third roommate, a grad student who was rarely home. Mia hadn't even known he owned a keyboard. Really? That would be amazing. The thought of being able to practice at home sent a thrill of excitement through her. "I'll ask him tomorrow," Zoe promised. "But seriously, Mia, I'm so happy for you. This is like, I don't know, fate or something." Mia smiled, too tired to argue about concepts like fate. "Maybe it is." Later, lying in bed, Mia replayed the evening in her mind. The feeling of the piano keys beneath her fingers. The expressions on people's faces as they listened. The way the music had filled the restaurant, changing the very atmosphere of the place. For 3 years, she'd been just a server at Riverstone, efficient, friendly, but essentially invisible to most customers. Tonight, for the first time, people had seen her. Really seen her. As she drifted off to sleep, Mia's thoughts turned to tomorrow, to next week, to the possibilities that suddenly seemed to be opening up before her. She wasn't just a server anymore. She was a pianist too, and somehow that changed everything. A month had passed since Mia's unexpected piano debut at Riverstone. Life had taken on a new rhythm, server by day, pianist by night. Her fingers had calloused in different places now, not just from carrying trays but from hours at the piano keys. Some nights she would come home with her back aching from sitting at the bench, but it was a good kind of ache, the kind that reminded her she was doing something she loved. Tonight was Friday, and the restaurant buzzed with its usual weekend energy. Mia sat at the piano playing a jazz standard that floated above the dinner conversations. She'd expanded her repertoire over the past few weeks, digging up old sheet music from her teenage years and learning new pieces that David had suggested would work well for the dinner crowd. As she played, she caught sight of Benji serving a table nearby. He shot her a quick smile and a thumbs up. That was another change, the way her co-workers looked at her now, with a mixture of respect and curiosity. She wasn't just one of them anymore. She was something else too. Finishing the song, Mia smoothly transitioned into a slower ballad. She had learned to read the room, to feel the energy of the diners and match her playing to it. Early evening called for livelier pieces. As the night deepened, she would shift to softer, more contemplative music. During a brief pause between songs, Mia took a sip of water and glanced around the restaurant. That's when she noticed a woman sitting alone at a small table near the piano. She was in her mid-40s perhaps, with short dark hair and an elegant gray suit. Unlike most diners who paid attention to their food and companions, this woman was watching Mia with undisguised interest. Mia smiled politely at her before beginning her next piece. The woman smiled back and gave a small nod of appreciation. An hour later, as Mia took her break, Lucia approached her with 2 plates of food. "Your dinner," she said, handing Mia 1 plate. "And the lady at table 12 sent this over for you." She handed Mia the second plate, which held a slice of Riverstone's famous chocolate cake. "Table 12? Mia looked over to where the woman in the gray suit was still sitting, now with a cup of coffee in front of her. "She's been here for almost 2 hours, Lucia said with a raised eyebrow. Just watching you play. David thinks she might be a music critic or something. Huh. Mia looked at the cake, then back at the woman who raised her coffee cup in a small salute. Maybe I should go thank her. Up to you. But eat first. You've been playing for 3 hours straight. Mia nodded and settled at a small table in the corner reserved for staff meals. She ate quickly, her mind still on the mysterious woman. Critics sometimes came to Riverstone, but they usually focused on the food, not the background music. After finishing her meal and taking a few appreciative bites of the rich chocolate cake, Mia made her way over to table 12. Hi, she said, feeling a bit awkward. I wanted to thank you for the cake. The woman smiled warmly. You're welcome. Please join me for a moment if you have time. Mia hesitated, then sat down across from her. Up close, she could see that the woman had keen blue eyes and a friendly face. I'm Diane Lee, the woman said, extending her hand. I teach at the City Conservatory of Music. Mia's heart skipped a beat as she shook Diane's hand. The conservatory was the most prestigious music school in the city, known for producing world-class musicians. Mia Chen, she replied. But I guess you figured that out from my name tag earlier. Diane laughed lightly. I did. I've been enjoying your playing tremendously, Mia. You have a natural musicality that can't be taught. Thank you, Mia said, warmth spreading through her chest at the compliment. That means a lot, especially from someone who teaches at the conservatory. Where did you study? Diane asked, taking a sip of her coffee. Oh, I took lessons growing up, but never formally studied music after high school. Mia felt suddenly self-conscious. Aware of all the gaps in her training? Really? Diane looked genuinely surprised. That's even more impressive then. Your technique has some rough edges, but your emotional connection to the music is remarkable. I just play what feels right, Mia said with a small shrug. Though inside she was glowing from the praise. That's exactly what I mean. Too many technically perfect pianists lack that instinct. Diane set down her cup. Have you ever considered pursuing music more seriously? Going back to school, perhaps? Mia laughed softly. Every day since I started playing here. But the conservatory? She shook her head. That's not really an option for someone like me. Someone like you? Diane's eyebrow rose. Someone who can barely afford community college classes, let alone a prestigious music school. Mia kept her tone light, matter-of-fact. Ah. Diane nodded slowly. You know, the conservatory offers scholarships. Full scholarships for exceptional talents. Mia stared at her, wondering if she'd heard correctly. Are you suggesting I apply? I'm suggesting you audition, Diane corrected gently. The spring semester auditions are in 3 weeks. It would be late admission, but exceptions can be made. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. I'm the head of the piano department. If you're interested, call me next week and we can discuss the requirements. Mia took the card, her hands slightly trembling. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Diane replied with a smile. That's all I ask for now. I'll think about it, Mia promised, though her mind was already racing with possibilities and obstacles. Excellent. Diane glanced at her watch. I should let you get back to your playing. But Mia, don't sell yourself short. Talent like yours doesn't come along every day. After Diane left, Mia returned to the piano in a daze. She played through her remaining sets on autopilot, her thoughts a million miles away. The conservatory. A scholarship. A real chance to study music. But what would that mean for her life? Her job at Riverstone? The steady if modest income she'd come to depend on? By the time she finished her last song at 11 o'clock, Mia's mind was a jumble of excitement and anxiety. She closed the piano cover and stood up, acknowledging the appreciative applause from the few remaining diners with a small bow. David approached as she gathered her sheet music. Another great night, he said. You really pack them in on the weekends now. I've had to add extra reservations since you started playing regularly. That's great, Mia said, trying to focus on the conversation despite her whirling thoughts. David seemed to notice her distraction. Everything okay? You seemed a little off during that last set. Mia hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. The woman who was sitting at table 12? She's from the City Conservatory. She suggested I audition for a scholarship. David's eyebrows shot up, but his smile was genuine.
Mia, that's fantastic.
The conservatory is the real deal. Yeah, it is. Mia tucked her music into her bag. But it's also a huge commitment. If I somehow got in, I don't know how I'd keep working here. David waved a hand dismissively. We'd figure something out. Maybe fewer shifts, different hours. He put a hand on her shoulder. Don't let this place hold you back, Mia. You've got a gift. His support brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Thanks, David, I haven't decided anything yet. It's a long shot anyway. Well, I'm rooting for you, whatever you decide. On her walk home that night, Mia pulled out Diane's card and stared at it under the glow of a street lamp. City Conservatory of Music. Diane Lee, Department Chair, Piano Performance. There was an email address, a phone number, and the conservatory's elegant logo. Her mind flashed back to her childhood, to her grandmother patiently teaching her scales, to the pride on her parents' faces at her first recital. How had she strayed so far from that path? It wasn't just money, though. That had been the easy excuse. Somewhere along the way, she'd stopped believing she deserved it. When Mia reached her apartment, she found Pete, her rarely seen roommate, sitting on the couch watching a late-night talk show. Hey, he said with a casual nod. Zoe said you needed to use my keyboard? It's set up in your room. What, really? Mia had mentioned Diane's offer to Zoe that morning, but hadn't expected such immediate action. Pete shrugged. It was just collecting dust in my closet. Figured you'd get more use out of it. That's really nice of you, thanks. Mia felt a rush of gratitude toward her quiet roommate. No problem. It's not a fancy one, but it has weighted keys. Should be good enough for practice. It's perfect, Mia assured him, already eager to try it out. In her small bedroom, the keyboard had been set up on a folding table, with her desk chair pulled up to it. It was an older model, but as Pete had said, it had weighted keys, the kind that responded like a real piano. Mia set down her bag and sat at the keyboard, turning it on. The familiar hum as it powered up sent a tingle of excitement through her. She put on headphones so she wouldn't disturb her roommates and played a few experimental notes. It wasn't a grand piano, but it was a start. For the next hour, she played through the pieces she'd performed that night, this time focusing on the technical elements that needed work. Diane had mentioned rough edges, and Mia was determined to smooth them out. Her phone buzzed with a text. It was Zoe. You still up? How was your night? Mia texted back. Amazing night. A teacher from the conservatory came to hear me play. She wants me to audition for a scholarship. Zoe's response was immediate and enthusiastic. OMGMIA, this is huge. A moment later, her bedroom door cracked open and Zoe peeked in, her expression excited. You have to tell me everything, she whispered loudly. Mia pulled off her headphones with a laugh. Come in, but we have to be quiet. Pete's watching TV. Zoe slipped in and sat on the edge of Mia's bed. Okay, spill. Every detail. As Mia recounted her conversation with Diane, Zoe's eyes grew wider and wider. So you're going to do it, right? She asked when Mia finished. You're going to audition? I don't know, Mia admitted. It's a huge step and there's no guarantee I'd get in. The competition is intense. But you have to try, Zoe insisted. This is like fate knocking on your door again. Mia smiled at her friend's enthusiasm. Maybe, but even if I got in, how would I pay for books, supplies, transportation? The scholarship might cover tuition, but there's so much more. We'd figure it out, Zoe said firmly. Maybe you could still play at Riverstone on weekends. Or teach piano to kids. There are options, Mia. You sound like David, Mia said with a small laugh. Well, David sounds like a smart guy. Zoe reached over and squeezed Mia's hand. Look, a month ago you were just serving tables. Now you're performing regularly and getting noticed by fancy music school teachers. Don't you want to see where this could go? Put that way, it was hard to argue. I do, Mia admitted softly. I really do. So call her, Zoe said, pointing to Diane's card on the desk. Set up a meeting. At least find out what the audition would involve. Okay, Mia said, feeling a mix of terror and exhilaration at the idea. I'll call her Monday. That's my girl. Zoe stood up and headed for the door. Get some sleep. You look exhausted. After Zoe left, Mia turned back to the keyboard, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. For so long, she'd thought of herself in such limited terms. Just a server, just trying to get by. But maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe she could be more. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere out there was the conservatory, with its practice rooms and concert halls and teachers like Diane Lee, who could help her grow as a musician. Mia played a single, quiet chord on the keyboard, letting it hang in the air of her small bedroom. 3 weeks to prepare for an audition. 3 weeks that could change the course of her life. She took a deep breath and began to play. Mia's hands were shaking as she stood outside the imposing stone building of the city. Conservatory of Music. 3 weeks of intense practice had led to this moment. 3 weeks of playing until her fingers cramped, of watching tutorial videos online, of sleeping too little and worrying too much. "You've got this," Zoe had told her that morning, helping her pick out an outfit that looked professional but not stuffy. Black pants, a deep blue blouse, and the one nice blazer Mia owned, usually reserved for job interviews now. Staring up at the conservatory's grand entrance with its columns and wide steps, Mia took a deep breath and checked the time on her phone. 20 minutes until her audition. Better to be early than rushing in at the last second. She climbed the steps, each one feeling a little higher than the last. Inside, the lobby was hushed with high ceilings and framed photographs of famous musicians lining the walls. A security guard at the front desk looked up as she entered. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm here for an audition," Mia said, her voice coming out steadier than she felt. "With Diane Lee?" The guard checked a list on his computer. "Mia Chen?" She nodded. "3rd floor, room 312. The elevator is around the corner to your right." "Thank you." Mia headed in the direction he'd pointed, her shoes clicking softly on the polished floor. The elevator was old-fashioned, with a metal gate that had to be pulled across manually. It creaked slightly as it carried her upward. Mia used the short ride to take a few calming breaths, trying to quiet the voice in her head that kept insisting she was in way over her head. On the 3rd floor, she followed the numbers on the doors until she reached 312. A small sign identified it as Faculty Office, Diane Lee, Department Chair. Mia knocked lightly. "Come in," called a familiar voice. Diane sat behind a desk covered with stacks of sheet music and student papers. The office was small but warm, with a window overlooking the conservatory's courtyard and a small upright piano against one wall. Framed concert programs and photographs of Diane with various musicians decorated the walls. "Mia, right on time." Diane smiled, standing to shake her hand. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Mia admitted. No point in pretending otherwise when her hands were visibly trembling. Diane's smile turned sympathetic. "That's completely normal. Even professional pianists get nervous before performances." She gestured to a chair. "Sit for a moment. Let's talk before we head to the audition room." Mia sat, placing her folder of sheet music carefully on her lap. "First of all, thank you for coming today," Diane said, leaning against her desk. "I know this is a big step, especially on such short notice." "Thank you for the opportunity," Mia replied. "I still can't believe you happened to come to Riverstone that night." "Actually, it wasn't entirely by chance," Diane admitted with a small smile. "Eleanor Henderson is an old friend of mine. After she attended your anniversary dinner, she called me, absolutely raving about this server who played the most beautiful Clair de Lune she'd ever heard." Mia's eyes widened. "Mrs. Henderson recommended me?" "She did. And Eleanor doesn't exaggerate about musical talent. She studied at Juilliard in her youth." Diane checked her watch. "We should head to the performance hall. The rest of the committee will be waiting." Mia's stomach dropped. "Committee?" "Just 3 other faculty members. Standard procedure for scholarship auditions." Diane must have noticed Mia's expression because she added gently, "They're all pianists themselves. They understand the pressure you're under." They walked together down the hallway to a set of double doors marked Recital Hall A. Diane paused before opening them. "Remember, Mia, play what moves you. Technical skill can be taught, but the ability to connect emotionally with music, that's something special." Inside, the recital hall was smaller than Mia had imagined, with perhaps 100 seats arranged in a semicircle around a stage where a gleaming grand piano stood. In the front row sat 3 people, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses, a middle-aged woman with her hair in a tight bun, and a younger man who looked barely older than Mia herself. "Colleagues, this is Mia Chen," Diane announced as they walked down the center aisle. "Mia, these are Professors Walsh, Abernathy, and Dr. Kim." They each nodded at Mia, their expressions neutral. Professor Walsh, the older man, consulted a sheet of paper. Ms. Chen, I understand you haven't had formal training since high school? That's correct, sir, Mia answered, trying to keep her voice steady. Interesting. He made a note on his paper, his expression revealing nothing. Well, we're looking forward to hearing you play, Professor Abernathy said, her tone brisk but not unkind. Please, whenever you're ready. Diane gave Mia an encouraging nod and joined her colleagues in the front row. Mia walked to the piano, her legs feeling oddly disconnected from the rest of her. The stage lights were warm on her skin. She adjusted the bench, set her music on the stand, and took a moment to gather herself. This piano was far grander than the one at Riverstone or Pete's electronic keyboard. The keys gleamed like perfect teeth waiting for her touch. Mia placed her hands on them, feeling their cool smoothness, and began to play. She had chosen 3 pieces for her audition: a Bach prelude to demonstrate technique, a Chopin nocturne to show emotional range, and finally, Debussy's Clair de Lune, the piece that had started her on this unexpected journey. As her fingers moved through the familiar patterns of the Bach, Mia gradually felt her nervousness fade. The music took over, carrying her along like a current. When she transitioned to the Chopin, she dared a quick glance at the committee. Their faces remained impassive, giving nothing away. Diane's eyes were closed, her head swaying slightly with the music. By the time Mia reached the Debussy piece, she had forgotten to be nervous. She wasn't playing for the committee anymore. She was playing for herself, for the pure joy of creating something beautiful. As the final notes of Clair de Lune faded into silence, Mia realized she had tears in her eyes. There was a moment of complete stillness in the hall. Then Professor Walsh cleared his throat. Thank you, Ms. Chen. Would you mind stepping outside for a few minutes while we confer? Of course. Mia stood, collected her music, and walked out of the hall on legs that felt like jelly. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. She had done it, played her best for the committee. Whether it was good enough, she couldn't say, but she had given it everything she had. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Mia checked her phone to distract herself, finding encouraging text messages from Zoe, Benji, and even David. Finally, the door opened, and Diane beckoned her back inside. The committee still sat in the front row, but their expressions had changed. Professor Abernathy was actually smiling. Ms. Chen, Professor Walsh began, you have some significant technical gaps in your playing, as one would expect from someone without formal training for several years. Mia's heart sank, but she nodded, accepting the criticism. However, he continued, your musical instincts are remarkable. The way you shaped the phrases in the Chopin in particular showed a natural understanding of the composer's intentions. Your Bach needs work, Professor Abernathy added, but your Debussy was quite moving. Dr. Kim, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. We believe you would benefit greatly from formal instruction, and we believe the conservatory would benefit from having a student with your passion and natural musicality. Mia's breath caught in her throat. Does that mean? Diane stepped forward, smiling broadly now. It means, Mia, that we would like to offer you the Henderson Scholarship for Promising Musicians. It covers full tuition for 2 years, with the possibility of renewal based on your progress. The Henderson Scholarship? Mia repeated, stunned. A new scholarship, Diane explained, established just last week by Dr. and Mrs. Henderson specifically for talented musicians who have faced financial barriers to education. You'll be the first recipient. Tears sprang to Mia's eyes again, and this time she couldn't hold them back. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Professor Abernathy suggested with a small laugh. Yes, Mia whispered, and then again stronger. Yes, thank you. There are conditions, Professor Walsh cautioned. You'll need to maintain a 3.5 GPA, participate in at least 1 student recital per semester, and take some remedial theory classes in addition to your regular course load. It will be challenging. I understand, Mia said, already imagining the long hours of practice and study ahead. But after years of double shifts and putting her dreams on hold, the thought of working hard at something she loved felt like a gift, not a burden. Classes for the spring semester begin next Monday, Diane said. It's short notice, I know. Will that work with your current job situation? Mia thought of her conversation with David. I think so. My boss at Riverstone has been really supportive. Maybe I can still play there on weekends. That would be excellent practical experience, Dr. Kim nodded approvingly. Real-world performance opportunities are valuable. After a few more minutes of discussion about schedules and paperwork, Mia found herself back in the hallway with Diane, still dazed by the sudden turn of events. I still can't believe this is happening, she said, and that the Hendersons created a scholarship. For someone like me. Eleanor was very impressed with you, not just as a musician but as a person, Diane explained. When I mentioned that I was hoping to bring you in for an audition, but worried about financial aid options this late in the year, she and Richard immediately offered to fund a new scholarship. She smiled at Mia's shocked expression. You made quite an impression that night. I was just filling in because the regular pianist didn't show up, Mia said, shaking her head in wonder. Sometimes life's biggest opportunities come from the most unexpected moments, Diane replied. The question is whether we're brave enough to seize them when they appear. As Mia walked down the conservatory steps an hour later, paperwork clutched in her hand and her head spinning with everything she needed to do before classes started. Her phone rang. It was Zoe. Well, her roommate demanded without preamble.
How did it go?
I got in, Mia said, still hardly believing it herself. And I got a full scholarship. Zoe's shriek of excitement was so loud that Mia had to hold the phone away from her ear. I knew it. I knew you could do it. This calls for a celebration. I'm calling everyone. Not everyone, Mia laughed. But yes, definitely a celebration. That night, Riverstone closed early for a private party. David had insisted on hosting when he heard the news, inviting all the staff along with Zoe, Pete, and a few of Mia's other friends. Even the Hendersons made an appearance, beaming with pride when Mia tearfully thanked them for their generosity. Music changed my life when I was young, Eleanor told her, clasping her hands warmly. Now it's your turn. At David's request, Mia played a few pieces on the restaurant piano, including La Vie en Rose for the Hendersons, and a lively jazz number that had Benji and some of the other servers dancing between tables. As the night wound down and people began to leave, Mia found herself alone at the piano. She played softly, thinking about the journey that had brought her here, from a server who occasionally glanced longingly at the restaurant's piano to a conservatory student with a future full of music. Just a few months ago, she had been so certain about who she was and what her life would be. A server, someone just getting by, someone whose dreams had been set aside in favor of practicality. Now everything had changed, and it had all started with that one moment of courage when she'd raised her hand and said, I can play. Mia smiled to herself as her fingers danced across the keys. Sometimes she was learning the most important thing wasn't having all the answers or knowing exactly where you were going. Sometimes the most important thing was just being brave enough to begin.